What would happen if a CEO disguised himself as a janitor and discovered that the very system he created was destroying the lives of the most dedicated people? The floor scrubber hummed with a steady rhythm, gliding slowly across the polished tiles of Fresh Mart. Ethan Ward kept his head low, hidden beneath a worn baseball cap and a faded jacket, his hands guiding the machine with the quiet precision of an invisible janitor. No one paid him any attention, and no one realized that the man pushing the scrubber was the founder and CEO of the largest supermarket chain in Texas. That was exactly what he wanted, to see for himself what the glowing reports never revealed. A cold chill drifted from the frozen section as he moved past it, and then Ethan froze when he heard something. A small sound, shaky and uneven, like a muffled gasp, followed by a choked sob. He stopped the machine, tilting his head slightly to listen. The sound was coming from the far end of the aisle, near the checkout counter, tucked behind a rack of discounted bread. Pushing the machine a few steps closer, he pretended to adjust the mop, his eyes scanning through the narrow gap between the shelves. There, crouched behind the counter, sat a young woman, her head buried in her hands. It was Chloe Bennett, a cashier whose file Ethan had read just weeks ago. Hard-working, quiet, with near-perfect customer satisfaction ratings. But now, Chloe was not the model employee praised in performance reviews. She was just a young woman breaking under the weight of pressure he had unknowingly created. Chloe held her phone close to her ear, her voice trembling, hoarse from holding back tears. "I can't take another shift. They'll cut all my hours if I say no. I haven't paid the electricity bill yet. My landlord sent me a warning. What am I supposed to do?" No, I'm not telling them. They said I have to be available all the time, but I can't be here 24/7. Ethan felt every word cutting into his chest, but what shattered him were the next words. Her voice cracked, then broke into sobs. "I've lost my mom. I've lost my home. Now I'm losing myself. I don't even know why I'm still trying anymore. I just need it once, just once, for someone to see me. Even if it's the person who wrote these damn policies." Ethan's grip tightened on the handle of the scrubber, his eyes flickering with something unsteady. She didn't know that the very man she was talking about was standing just a few feet away, dressed as a janitor, frozen in place. At that moment, a young employee walked by, glancing at Chloe with a cold expression, muttering just loud enough for Ethan to hear. "Crying again? If she can't handle it, she should just quit." The cruel words hit like a slap. Ethan lowered his face to hide the storm brewing in his expression, but inside something had awakened. In that moment, he knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just a secret investigation. This was the moment everything would change. Ethan Ward leaned against an old shopping cart, his gaze fixed on nothing, staring into the empty space ahead. The steady hum of the freezer's cooling system droned in the background, like a somber soundtrack to the memories replaying in his mind. Fresh Mart, the brainchild he had built from a small Dallas store with barely 10 shopping carts and a few worn-out shelves, had once been the embodiment of family values, a place where he knew every employee by name, where each morning he carried heavy boxes into the stockroom alongside them. Ethan could still feel the burn of rope digging into his palms, still recall the smell of fresh bread wafting through the aisles as he brewed coffee himself and greeted every employee with a genuine smile. But now, those memories felt like a distant luxury. Fresh Mart had grown into a chain of 400 branches spread across multiple states. Profits had skyrocketed, and his face had graced the covers of prestigious business magazines. Yet Ethan had to admit to himself he had lost the most important thing: his connection to people. He thought back to that fateful meeting 2 years ago, where a group of sharp-suited consultants with smooth, detached voices had convinced him to approve a new policy. Flexible hours, they had called it, presenting it as the perfect solution to reduce labor costs and increase operational stability. One young consultant, with a cold, calculated smile, had said, "We don't need emotions, we need numbers. The system will automatically prioritize employees willing to work 24/7. Those who can't keep up aren't valuable enough to retain." Ethan, swayed by the promising profit charts at the time, had nodded without once asking, what about those who have families to care for? He couldn't even remember exactly when he had signed the document, just another lifeless signature among the dozens of papers that landed on his desk every day. Now, as he recalled those moments, every cold, logical word echoed in his mind like sharp knives. That policy had turned the very people he had once promised to protect into nothing more than data points, stripped of humanity, shuffled around by an automated system. And Chloe Bennett, the young woman crying at the end of the aisle, was just one of the many victims of what he had once believed to be a wise decision. Ethan drew in a deep breath, forcing down the sharp ache in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of true regret. And for the first time, he swore he would no longer stay hidden behind the walls of corporate boardrooms, watching everything fall apart through numbers on a report. The next morning, Ethan Ward returned to the supermarket, dressed once again in the same worn janitor's uniform, as if the haunting night before had never happened. He moved slowly through each aisle, pretending to check for streaks of water on the floor, but in truth, his eyes followed only one person: Chloe Bennett. She arrived right on time, even 10 minutes early. Not because anyone demanded it, but out of a habit born from relentless pressure. Her uniform, though carefully washed and neatly pressed, was faded from overuse, and it could not hide the exhaustion etched into her face. Ethan watched her quietly from a distance, noting how Chloe smiled at customers with almost flawless patience. But every time she bent down to arrange items for the briefest moment, her eyes betrayed her, a tight, anxious look, as if she were silently counting the money she might have by the end of the week. Between the steady beeps of the register and the rustle of plastic bags, Chloe would pause for a split second now and then, glancing quickly toward the front doors as if waiting for something. Maybe good news, maybe a miracle in a life weighed down by constant worry. During her short lunch break, she sat alone in the corner of the cramped break room, her meal nothing more than a cup of instant noodles and a bottle of water. Ethan stood by the doorway, pretending to empty a trash bin, his eyes discreetly watching her. Chloe unlocked her phone, and her expression darkened instantly as the screen lit up. A message stood out clearly. Final notice. Rent overdue by 3 days. Pay immediately to avoid further action. Her hand trembled as she quickly turned the screen off, placing the phone face down on the table, as though hiding her despair from the world. Ethan felt the air in the room grow colder. He saw her small shoulders trembling slightly, yet no one else seemed to notice. In that moment, he understood Behind the bright, customer-friendly smile praised in countless internal reports was a human being fighting every single day just to survive. His grip tightened around the trash bin handle, and he took a deep breath to steady the anger rising inside him. He had once been proud of the system he had built, but now, that very system was crushing the most dedicated people it was supposed to protect. That afternoon, Ethan Ward still carried the same guise of an anonymous janitor, leaning against the shelf with a mop in hand. He wasn't seeking out conversations, but what he overheard felt like a slap to the face. Two young employees stood leaning against a display, talking loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. One lowered his voice slightly, though his tone dripped with disdain. Chloe used to work 30 hours a week. Now she's down to 8. That's the flexible hours rule for you. Shouldn't have taken so many days off. The other laughed mockingly. Yeah, what did she expect? This place isn't a daycare. If you're not grinding hard enough, you get your hours cut. That's the rule. No room for people who come and go as they please. Ethan's grip on the mop tightened until the veins in his hands stood out, but he kept his face expressionless. Then a deeper, wearier voice spoke up from behind the counter. Martha Lane, an older employee. Don't blame the girl entirely. They never fire anyone outright here. They just cut your hours so much you quit on your own. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, as if afraid someone might hear. But to Ethan, her words rang in his head like a warning bell. A younger man, likely a stockroom worker, glanced around before letting out a quiet sigh. The girl's not lazy. She only took 2 days off to care for her mum in the hospital. 2 days. But the system flagged her as less available right away, cold as a machine. That sentence tightened something deep in Ethan's chest. He stood frozen by the bread aisle, staring at the floor as if focusing on a stain. But inside his mind, waves of anger were building. He remembered those meetings where he had convinced himself that the flexible hours policy was progress. Now, that very policy was turning loyal employees into victims, pushing them into desperation, while no manager cared enough to notice. The casual, careless conversations he was hearing felt like knives cutting into him, because he knew all of this traced back to one signature, his own, signed carelessly while trusting cold numbers on a chart. And now, he was seeing with his own eyes the damage it had caused. Ethan drew in a long breath, forcing himself to hold back the fury rising in his chest. But deep down, he was starting to understand that this was no longer just an undercover investigation. This was the moment to start dismantling everything he once believed was right. Late in the afternoon, as the supermarket began to empty, Ethan Ward decided he could no longer just stand by and watch. He pushed the floor, cleaning cart closer to the checkout counter, pretending to mop the tiles, but in truth, he wanted to speak to Chloe Bennett. The young woman stood there, posture straight, yet her shoulders carried a quiet weariness, her smile mechanical as she greeted each customer, fading the moment they turned away. Waiting until the counter was clear, Ethan spoke in a low, steady voice, keeping the hesitant tone of an anonymous janitor. You're really good with customers. I saw you earlier helping that elderly lady pick out her groceries. You were very patient. Are you always like that? Chloe glanced at him, startled for a moment, then offered a thin, fragile smile. Thank you. I guess I just think it's what I'm supposed to do. Ethan bent slightly, pretending to scrub a faint streak of water by the base of the counter, his voice casual but deliberate. "With that attitude, you're bound to get promoted sooner or later. Have you ever thought about doing something else? You seem good enough to move up here." The question made Chloe pause for a brief second. The forced smile disappeared, and for the tiniest moment, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe it was a dream she once had, but it vanished as quickly as a breeze snuffing out a candle. She lowered her voice, her gaze drifting toward the front doors as if speaking to herself. "I used to think about that, but now I don't dare to anymore. It's not about what I want to do now. It's about surviving. I don't need a dream job. I just need one that doesn't make me feel like I want to disappear." Ethan froze, his chest tightening as her words sank in. Her voice carried no complaint, just the quiet resignation of someone who had already accepted this harsh reality. And somehow, that calm matter of fact tone hurt him more than the sound of her muffled sobs he had heard the night before. Ethan lowered his gaze, hiding the turmoil in his eyes. In that moment, he knew without question that nothing could stop him from changing things. He would not allow someone like Chloe to live begging for extra hours just to survive. The next morning, Freshmart began as usual, with the steady beeping of scanners and the soft murmur of customers chatting. But no one knew that a storm was about to sweep through this place. Ethan Ward walked in, no longer wearing the worn janitor's uniform. He was dressed in a charcoal grey suit, no tie, but his dignified posture and unwavering gaze made it impossible for anyone to mistake him for an ordinary employee. News of his presence spread quickly. Within minutes, the branch manager, Reuben Grant, hurried over, a strained smile on his face. "Mr. Ward, what a surprise to see you." But Ethan didn't let him finish. His voice was low, yet it carried authority that silenced the entire aisle. "I want to see all employees right now, at aisle 4. Curious, astonished eyes followed him as people quickly gathered, forming a small circle in the middle of the supermarket. Chloe Bennett stood at the end of the line, holding a receipt in her hand, unsure if she should stay until Ethan turned, looked directly at her, and spoke in a calm yet firm voice. "You stay. I need you here." Chloe froze, glancing around nervously before slowly stepping forward, her worried eyes betraying the fear that she had somehow done something wrong. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze sweeping across every face before him. "I am Ethan Ward. I built Freshmart from a small store. I once believed numbers could replace human hearts. And I signed a policy I thought was right." He paused, holding up a file before opening it, his voice lowering. "This is Chloe Bennett's file. An almost perfect employee, loved by customers, with an excellent record. But because she took 2 days off to care for her dying mother, the system automatically cut almost all of her hours. 2 days. Just 2. Chloe looked at him, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Ethan met her gaze, his voice no longer sounding like a corporate announcement, but a sincere confession. "Last night, I heard you say that this job made you feel like you wanted to disappear. And I realized I was the one who made people like you invisible." A heavy silence swept over the room. Reuben stepped forward awkwardly, trying to defend himself. "Mr. Ward, we were only following company policy. But Ethan turned to him, his eyes sharp as steel. "You followed the policy, but this policy was created by me, and I was wrong." The words froze the air around them. Chloe lowered her head, tears glistening in her eyes, while Ethan stood tall, as if standing trial in front of the very people he had once sworn to protect. The atmosphere inside Fresh Mart felt as if it had been frozen in place after Ethan Ward's confession. Every employee stood still, their eyes fixed on him. The man once seen as a symbol of success, now standing before them, openly admitting his mistakes. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze unwavering, his voice ringing out strong and resolute. "I will not let anyone here disappear because of a cold, unfeeling system. From this moment on, the flexible hours policy is suspended immediately." Murmurs spread throughout the room, several employees exchanging surprised looks. Ethan continued, his tone firm, every word carved with genuine regret. "From now on, every change to work schedules must be reviewed and approved by a manager directly. No more letting a machine decide your fate. We will work with human eyes, and more importantly, with human hearts." Reuben Grant, the branch manager, sweating nervously, stepped forward, trying to speak. "But sir, what if—" Ethan cut him off with a glance as sharp as a blade. "There are no what-ifs. We are not time-keeping machines. This is a workplace for people. And if anyone has a problem treating their co-workers with respect—" His eyes flicked briefly toward a few younger employees who had been known to mock others, his voice dropping to a cold steel edge. "Then the door is right there. We don't need anyone who values numbers over human lives." A long silence followed. Then slowly, Martha Lane, one of the older employees, nodded, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. A few others began to smile faintly, and Chloe stood frozen, her eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Ethan turned toward her, his voice softening, almost like a promise. "I can't change what's already happened, Chloe. But I promise from today on, there will never be another Chloe Bennett who has to go through this again." Chloe pressed her lips together, her eyes filling with tears. For the first time in weeks, she didn't have to bow her head to hide her emotions. And for the first time, Ethan felt his heart was finally doing the right thing. Not for profit, but for people. That afternoon, Fresh Mart felt like it had taken on an entirely different atmosphere. There were no more suspicious glances, no more indifferent whispers. Instead, there were soft greetings and awkward but genuine smiles. Ethan Ward remained at the store, not returning to headquarters as he normally would. He took off his suit jacket, rolled up the sleeves of his dress shirt, picked up a cleaning cloth, and joined the evening shift as if he were just another employee. It surprised many, leaving them slightly uneasy at first, but soon they began to smile and accept his humble presence. Chloe Bennett was different too. She continued working as usual, but her eyes no longer carried the exhausted hopelessness they had the day before. During her shift, Martha Lane walked over and gently placed a cup of hot tea in Chloe's hands, smiling warmly. "You've worked hard, dear. Now someone finally sees you." Chloe lowered her head, murmuring a shy thank you, while Martha turned away, her eyes slightly misty. At the next counter, a young employee, the same one who had mocked Chloe the previous day, hesitated for a moment before stepping forward to help her stack items on the shelves. He said nothing, offering only a clumsy nod before returning to his own work. Ethan watched it all, a strange mix of sorrow and hope stirring inside him. He stepped closer to Chloe, holding a wooden sign engraved with bold, clear words. "This is a workplace for people. If you are tired, you may sit. If you are struggling, you may speak. You will not be punished for being human." Handing her the sign, his voice was warm and steady, no longer the commanding tone of a CEO, but the sincere request of a man trying to make things right. "Chloe, place this somewhere everyone can see, so that anyone who walks in here will understand we are changing, starting today." Chloe's hands trembled as she took the sign, her eyes lifting to meet his, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Thank you. Truly. Thank you." Ethan only smiled, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder before returning to his cleaning duties. In that moment, for the first time in many years, he no longer felt like he was running an empire. He felt like he was finally doing the right thing for the people who had built it alongside him. A week later, Ethan Ward sat in his office at headquarters, a stack of unopened financial reports in front of him. But instead of looking at numbers, he was typing a message to be sent to every Freshmart employee across all states. His voice, as he quietly read the words he had just written, carried both sincerity and unwavering determination. "I was wrong. I allowed a system designed to maximize profit to crush the very people who dedicate themselves to this company. Last week, I witnessed one of our employees, Chloe Bennett, fighting through despair just to survive while still smiling at customers. And I realized that our silence has been our greatest failure." He paused, took a deep breath, then continued typing. "Starting today, we are giving humanity back to every Freshmart store. The flexible scheduling policy is suspended indefinitely. All changes to work schedules will now be reviewed by human managers, not machines. We will retrain every manager to ensure that when an employee needs help, they will be heard and supported. I cannot promise to fix everything overnight, but I promise that I will never again ignore anyone's pain just because it does not appear on a spreadsheet." Within hours of the message being sent, Freshmart's internal network flooded with comments. Many employees shared personal stories. Some sent messages of gratitude. Others admitted they cried when they read his words. One photo began circulating widely. Chloe Bennett hanging the wooden sign Ethan had given her, with the bold words carved into it, "You will not be punished for being human." The photo taken by Martha Lane was posted with a simple yet powerful caption, "Thank you for seeing us." Ethan saw that photo while sitting alone in his office, his expression softening as he stared at it. In that moment, he understood that he had just taken the first step, not only to save Freshmart, but to restore the values he had lost somewhere along the way in his pursuit of success. 3 months later, Freshmart had changed so much that even long-time customers noticed the difference. Employees no longer worked with downcast eyes and lifeless expressions. They greeted customers with genuine smiles, not the forced ones meant to secure good ratings. Stores across every state now displayed wooden signs with the words, "This is a workplace for human beings. If you are tired, you may sit. If you are struggling, you may speak. You will not be punished for being human." Miraculously, customers began staying longer. Sales increased, and employee turnover rates dropped significantly. But for Ethan Ward, what made him proud was not the improving numbers, but the people he now saw smiling within the very system he had once hurt. At the branch where it had all begun, Chloe Bennett still stood at her familiar checkout counter. But she was no longer the girl who kept her head down and endured in silence. She was now the head of Voices First, an employee council created by Ethan to allow staff to contribute feedback and challenge any policy before it was implemented, company-wide. Every Monday, they held meetings in the staff break room, and Ethan regularly attended via video, sitting quietly and listening to every opinion, not as a commanding CEO, but as a man learning how to listen. That day, Ethan appeared at the branch unexpectedly, without any prior announcement. He leaned casually against the counter, watching as Chloe instructed a new employee on how to organize the shelves. When Chloe noticed him, she looked momentarily startled, but Ethan simply smiled. "You're doing great," he said warmly, and it wasn't an empty corporate compliment, but a sincere acknowledgement. Chloe met his gaze, her eyes shining with a confidence she had never shown before, and softly replied, "Thank you for seeing me, and for seeing all of us." Ethan remained silent, simply nodding. In that moment, he no longer thought of himself as a CEO running a billion-dollar empire. He was just a man trying to make things right. And finally, he had done something no spreadsheet could ever measure. He had restored trust to the people who had built everything alongside him from the very beginning. And somewhere between the cheerful laughter and lively conversations of the employees, he knew Freshmart had entered a new chapter, a chapter where people were valued for the worth they truly deserved. This story reminds us that a business can only truly be sustainable when it puts people before numbers. Change does not always begin with big decisions, but with the courage to listen and understand those on the front lines. If you believe kindness can change an entire system, hit like and subscribe to help spread this value. And leave a comment with the words, "See me," because sometimes all we really need is simply to be seen.